I want to welcome you and thank you for coming to this event. My name is Jeff Shaman and I am the Interim Dean of the Climate School. We are thrilled to be able to help host this event here as part of Climate Week New York City. I want to tell you a little bit, very briefly, about the Climate School and where we sit. We situate ourselves really in the solution space, backed by obviously research and scholarship, but we're really thinking about how do we educate the next generation of individuals who are going to go out in the world and work on issues like food security, water security, groundwater depletion, circular economies, waste management, environmental policy, climate finance, mitigation, adaptation. I can go on and on and on. The reason why we're squarely in the solution space is not that we don't need to know how much the world is warming or changing, what it's doing to our hydrologic cycle, but our students and the demands of society is what are we going to do about it? How are we going to address those issues in a fundamental and important way? And what we feel is by becoming a school, which we are newly a school born out of what was the Earth Institute, we're going to have the capacity to educate hundreds of students every year and to seed them out in the world so that they can be the ones finding solutions, moving into all sectors, private, public, NGO, and providing new solutions and ideas and technologies and policies that we're never going to dream of. And I believe really strongly that as a school, our ability to exponentiate our impact, not only the research and practice that we do here, but also our ability to put people out in the world who are really capable and top-notch and think about wicked transdisciplinary problems and simplify them down to basic algorithms. These are the people that we need to bring out into the world. That's the premise and that's the promise of the Climate School. The solutions that we see in it are solutions like what we have at the Columbia Water Center. You know, water is obviously critical for all forms of life, what we do, and I don't think we need to dwell on all the examples of hydrologic, let's say, irregularity or extremes that we have seen over the last year. We've seen it a lot in temperature, but we have certainly seen it a lot in terms of storm activity and floods. You just need to look at what's happened recently in the Mediterranean, in Libya, and Greece, and Turkey to understand how much stress there is on our natural systems. And how we manage water and deliver that in a potable way to people is a central issue for society writ large. It's something that we're going to have to grapple with as long as we're here and as long as we're attempting to steward our planet. I also want to point out that those issues do not just extend to the natural sciences. They bring in all sorts of financing, risk management, governance, economic opportunities. They dwell in the social sciences, the humanities. Obviously, governance and policy are really strongly implicated in this. It requires a transdisciplinary effort. It requires a new breed of expertise where people are really dialoguing, learning each other's languages, and learning how to support one another so that they can address those difficult problems, reduce them down to their simple components, and actually bring forth the kinds of solutions that we need. So I'm going to stop here. I'm thrilled to know that you're all here to solving these challenges. I'm thrilled that you're coming here to join together during Climate Week out of your busy schedules and to come together as a transdisciplinary group to talk about our water issues here in America. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Alex. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much, Dean, and welcome to everybody for another year here at the Forum. We all know water. We all need water. We all have contact with water, and fundamentally, we are all water. So today is a day, do we ever take a step back and stop thinking and also trying to rethink and think again about water? What does it mean to us? What does it mean to our community? What does it mean to the world? And what does it mean, again, to us as individuals, as participants of all this? So today, for the next few hours, we're setting forth an agenda and hopefully encouraging everybody to really take a moment to rethink and ponder that. Science was born out of the idea, as its Latin name states, of knowledge, and also trying to organize that knowledge, which in some cases can be incredibly difficult. So 9 years later, when we started this water journey, an important part of that was constantly learning and constantly trying to solve. One thing that is given is that we constantly need to flood ourselves with this knowledge in order to achieve that task, and the information, and also surround ourselves with multidisciplinary people that can enrich that as we all look forward to that same goal, which in this case is really rethinking water. We first came together with Professor Lal, who's going to speak in a second, about 5 years ago in the Columbia Water Center, and as well as many of the other constituents that we'll see here today, the thought leaders, the practitioners, the federal government, policymakers, to really help us, as the dean said, to try to resolve some of these algorithms as we rethink water. So it gives me with great confidence today to say that let's all come together to rethink and also try to make sense of it with these algorithms as we continue to solve water. I'm going to go through, you see some of the people that will doing the welcome address this morning. I'm going to walk through the agenda. Firstly, I want to thank many of our sponsors and the various constituents that are here today, including the Columbia World Projects, Amani Advisors, Raymond James, Xylem, and Womble Dixon, as well as the multiple interdisciplinary and also interactive programming that we'll see throughout the day, and the various sponsors here. The agenda today, we'll start off with 2 very important keynote addresses. We will then move on to the main stage panels that you see here on the left, as well as more interactive programming that you'll find outside in the foyer and also upstairs on the 3rd floor for those that want to focus on specific areas within water and also have more smaller interactive dialogues, including a PFAS discussion, which will be in the morning upstairs, as well as in the afternoon. We'll rejoin here for a sort of interactive AQ test that we do every year that has continued to gain sort of importance and traction here. We'll have a Riverside chat, again here on the main stage in the afternoon, followed by 2 more specific panels here, as well as 2 more breakout sessions, Rethinking Women in Water, as well as Why Does the Media Need Water, which will take place in different parts of this building for smaller groups. And then we will reconvene here in the afternoon to talk more about the future. We will have Emma from NEOM, who will be speaking in the afternoon, as well as the first preview of a new movie, Our Blue World, which will hopefully leave us with the hope of the future for water. And then we will end the day again here. So with the logistics, I also want to point out, this is the interactive programming. I'd also like to point out for questions and answers and also for the AQ test, if people can download the Slido on your phones, feel free to send questions directly through Slido, as well as participate in the AQ test throughout the day, as well as the audience at home virtually. Please download this to feel more interactive with us here at the forum. So with the logistics out of the way, I want to hand it over to our partner here, somebody who I've admired for a long time, helped us with knowledge, helped us with algorithms, the distinguished Professor Lal. So thank you.
Okay. Thanks very much, Alex. This is a special year for us. It's 15 years since the Columbia Water Center was founded, 10 years since we started America's Water Events, and 5 years since our partnership with Science started. So 5, 10, 15. I have to look forward to what 20 means here. I have no idea. I want to thank all the groups that have come together that Alex already identified for making this happen. Water's been a passion personally for me, and it's been rewarded by Columbia by its commitment to it to a great extent. And I've gotten to know a lot of people, some of whom are going to be talking right after me, Radhika Fox and Peter Glick. And it's been a long journey that I'm very excited about. The thing that concerns me the most is that many of the colleagues that I have in academia do not seem to understand where we stand as a country in terms of the current situation with water and with water infrastructure. When I've tried to convene a consortium of universities to focus on America's water infrastructure, 2 weeks ago, Radhika presented to them a perspective from the EPA on what the needs are and what kind of things needs to be done. It was very eloquent. She talked about the fact that there are communities that are simply unable to even access funds. Why funds? if you don't have funds, you can't build infrastructure. If your infrastructure is failing, that's the end of the story for you. And for many of the poorer countries, economically disadvantaged populations, this is the reality today. But this is also going to be the reality for all of us if we don't actually step up and do something. So Radhika talked about that. And some of the feedback was, we have the best infrastructure in the world. What are you guys talking about? And my reaction was, let's keep believing that. It's good to believe that, right? But in reality, we do have a problem. And the problem is encapsulated in the fact that most of our dams are now older than what they were designed for. Damian Georgino, who's on the National Infrastructure Advisory Council, they issued a report 2 weeks ago also. I was talking to him earlier today, and he talked about it, and he said, this is a real problem. It takes us 20 years to reauthorize a dam. We have discussions on dam removal. Now, all of these things require money, and no one is paying attention to it. I testified before the Congressional Committee on Water Infrastructure and Hydropower, and they said, we are putting up $3 billion to help with aging dams. My reaction was, I didn't know that. That's very nice. Then someone in the committee spoke up and said, Professor, do you realize that's over 30 years? And my reaction was, the Oroville Dam repairs in California cost around $2 billion. So this is not taking us anywhere. Periodically, we have people who tell us that we need $1 trillion to fix aging water infrastructure. I've never understood where that number really comes from and what analysis they have done to establish that number. So I started looking into it, and it was pretty easy to come up with 2 trillion, and then I was not sure what to make of that. So we have a problem, and we need to invest in it, and we need to do something. The question is, how did we get there? And one of the things to keep in mind there is that the federal government is the primary investor historically in all public infrastructure, and water is public infrastructure. Starting in 1982, the federal investment in water infrastructure was decimated. In roads, in telecom, in IT, it grew or stayed the same. In energy, it grew. In water, it got decimated. So it's not a surprise that today, when Radhika takes over the EPA water activities, the first challenge she puts forward and addresses is, where do we get the money back into the system? And so that's, I think, what you're going to hear a bit of, but you're going to hear a lot more from her on that. So at Columbia, one of the things we got concerned with in this was, A, how do I communicate what the challenge really is? And B, how do we help organizations such as the EPA figure out where to prioritize this? If I look at dams, we have 92,000 dams in the country. How do we know where the risk is the greatest of failure? How do we know what would be impacted by that? How do we identify where that money should go to remove the dam or to actually redo it? If we have climate change generating new extremes, surely we need more storage, not less storage. But that's not the mood of the country. So how are we going to deal with that? My personal answer to that is, we have to figure out how to control the weather. We are going to control where the storms go. We are going to control where the heat waves go. Yeah, when I bring that up, many people say the guy has gone completely bonkers. Well, take a think on this, okay? And see where you come back with. Do you want to build a whole lot of new dams in the country? Or do you want to figure out some way to nudge systems that are moving around to where you want them to go? So it's a question that has to be raised. It may not be what we actually do. So we have to think about those kind of things. But what we have been practically doing the last few years is, in this sense of prioritization, I'll put up this map right there. 20% of the United States had houses that had septic tanks for wastewater disposal in 1998. Between 1998 and now, that number has gone up to 30%. The failure rate of septic tanks is 50% in Georgia, for example. What are we really looking at here? We started a project with various partners supported by the Columbia World Projects in the state of Alabama because there was a clear identified need on what to do about this particular problem. As we got into it, the dimensions of the problem became national, not just Arizona. And we are building more and more of these. And many of these are in coastal areas where the sea level is rising, which counterbands any success associated with septic tanks. So here, Sarah Schwetz now was here as a postdoc. She's now at RAND. She and a team of students worked on figuring out, using data from the state of Georgia on permits, failures of septic tanks, reauthorization of septic tanks, demographics of the population, soil types, rainfall considerations, and so forth, what the probability was that a septic tank is likely to fail somewhere. And then you project that onto the southeast. This kind of analysis should be getting done by more people because it highlights where the need is going to be, where the need is today. And you can superpose future scenarios of climate change on it if you want. But you know what? Climate is not the only story here. It is the nature of that particular system. So what we've been doing, okay, here we go, yeah, is how do you solve these kind of problems? And so back to Alabama, this is a place called Uniontown, Alabama. What we started focusing on was what kind of infrastructure should be provided to people so that it's not septic tanks. It's something which is more modern, something which is controllable, something where you actually can see what the outcomes are. So the idea went to, can you come up with clustered, decentralized, modern systems that could be remotely managed and controlled that would serve the poorest population at a price point not substantially different from septic tanks? Okay? So that's the challenge that we took on. This shows what happens when we develop algorithms that allow us to figure out how that works. It divides this community of 2,500 people into 5 zones. Each gets its own treatment plant. Each gets septic tanks, but they are not septic tanks. The effluent from the septic tanks goes to a treatment plant. Okay? That is not terribly interesting, except to engineers. What's interesting is the cost of doing this is 1/3 the cost of a centralized system, and on a per unit basis, with the federal subsidies that are available, it's back to where we targeted it. Okay? So what we've been trying to do with the Columbia World Project support is to design a system so that any community in the United States can go to a map on the web, draw a polygon around themselves. It'll suck in the data on the roads, the houses, the soils, everything that's needed, and give them a candidate design so that they can turn in a proposal to the EPA for funding. Because the proposals to EPA for funding require a technical proposal of how are you going to actually do this, how much should it cost, and so forth. So these are examples that I give back to the consortium that we have put together of 30 universities to start working with the federal government, with the private investors, philanthropy, so that we can actually engender change in this space rather than just talk about it. You'll hear more of that today, and I hope that it will be an enjoyable session for you. We hope that you'll also get into the app and start asking questions of people because we want this to be interactive. Thank you very much, and with that, I would introduce John to move the agenda forward.
Good morning and welcome everybody. For those who don't know me, I'm John Rigas, CEO of Science. First of all, let me thank Columbia University, the dean, the professor for hosting us here today. We are most appreciative. One quick note that last year I spoke too much, in fact 13 seconds more than my allotted time. So Alex has asked me to be very short this year, so I won't say too much. But I will remind everybody that from the private sector viewpoint, when we first started to evangelize the institutional community about the need to invest in water, we were met, our approaches were met with tremendous skepticism. It cannot be done, it has never been done, it'll never be done before, the government should do it, et cetera, et cetera. We ignored that and forged ahead, and I'm pleased to say that we are making tremendous progress, and we will talk about that a little bit today. The progress that we're making and the way we do it is we try to find problems to solve and then identify a company that can solve them, those problems. So we are in the solutions business, as the dean said, and we try to, we endow the company with all the resources that it needs to be able to solve the problems. So what are these problems? One that you heard of last year is the problem that CSWR solves, which is the fact that we have too many small utilities that are underperforming and non-compliant in the United States. So we buy these utilities, we fix them up, we refurbish them, and we, in fact, operate them within compliance. CSWR now operates 980 systems and has brought 273,000 people into compliance. Another problem is, as the professor said, that a lot of communities actually don't have access to funding. So we have created a new type of institution that can provide creative solutions that are non-burdensome to the municipality to actually be able to have the type of plant and equipment that they need and pay for it over a very, very long period of time, which is very comfortable. And that allows them to provide clean water and wastewater services to their community, which in fact is something that we need to have if we will consider ourselves to be civilized. And unfortunately, many communities don't have it in the United States. A third problem that we solve, again thinking very basically and very simply, is that the business of water and water is very local. Okay, so you have to think about local solutions, and when you treat wastewater, you can find simple solutions. So one of our companies, IWS, that you'll hear about again later today, has developed a product called the Blue Box, which is a wastewater treatment plant that can be dropped anywhere within 30 days and can operate, and it's non-invasive environmentally. So in fact, you can pick it up and take it away, and you haven't made any impact on the environment. And it's the best type of distributed infrastructure. So that's, again, a very simple solution, but addressing the needs of the local communities. Then another thing that we solve for is measuring the performance of different elements of what is called water infrastructure. One of those elements, unfortunately, in some parts of the United States, are septic tanks. And think of this. Many of you probably have these apps on your iPhones that you can measure everything about your body, the heartbeat, how much stress you have, and so on. So we have accomplished a lot as humankind, but we cannot measure, in some cases, if the septic tank is full. And if the septic tank is full, then as it gets fuller, it'll spill over, and that means that wastewater is going to be in the backyard of the home. And that also means that the kids who are resident in the home will be playing in the wastewater that has been untreated. That brings disease, and Professor Lal has been very clear about how waterborne disease, unfortunately, is rising in some communities in the United States, but it's something that can be prevented very, very easily. And again, we make the equipment that actually measures whether the septic tank is full, which is a very simple measurement, so that it can be cleaned properly. So these are the simple solutions that are needed, and they are not necessarily complex or need trillions of dollars, and I'll go into this in a second. But before I go into that, today I have the pleasure of introducing a very famous expert who has written the book, which is a must-read book, The 3 Ages of Water.
You have to swap, because Radhika has to leave first. So.
Peter Glick, I'll be very quick then. Okay, Peter Glick.
But he's going to go afterwards.
Sorry?
Radhika needs to speak, and then we're going to switch.
So you want me to stop?
Yeah, and then we'll do the introduction.
Okay, all right. I'll stop.
We'll bring you back to do the introduction to Peter, but before that, I have due to scheduling and Climate Week here, we have the great pleasure of having Radhika Fox, the Assistant Administrator for Water for the EPA, who's going to speak first, and then I'll bring John back to introduce Peter and the rest of. Thank you, Radhika. Now back to our regular scheduled programming here. John, please come back and introduce. Yes, we are now sure. And people in the back, please make your way in. If you can just make way, there's a bit of space in the middle. Thank you.
You want me to start from the beginning?
If you want.
Okay, I'll repeat myself, okay. All right. I was about to say that we have the pleasure of, in our company today, Peter Glick, who is one of the foremost water experts in the world, and he has written a must-read book, The Three Ages of Water. It's a phenomenal book, especially for the lovers of history. It presents a magisterial view of our relationship with water from literally the beginning of time, and reminding us in a very epic narrative how water is part of our being and our culture, and why it must be valued again, as it has always been the case of successful civilizations in the course of history. We must respect water sources and protect them with sophisticated and sustainable management. That's stating the obvious, and the consequences of not doing so are obviously catastrophic. You'll see several examples. You'll read about several examples of that in the book. But the horrifying thing is that some of the examples that are described in the book, such as famines and mega droughts and storms of biblical proportions, actually are occurring today in the world. So in fact, what may have looked like a historical event, it's actually the reality of some people around the world today. And then there is the third part of the book, which is very interesting, makes an extremely interesting point, that we have to move away from the notions of how much water is being used and so on and so forth, and really focus ourselves on rationalization and efficiency, all of which are possible with today's technology and know-how, which is far superior to what historically humankind had. And so all that can be applied. And that's, in fact, the examples that I was giving before is exactly what we do, representing the private sector. One last note on the private sector, and on the possibility of we can, we will, it can be done, and so on and so forth. And this is our scorecard. It's not a show-off. I just mean it as an example of both order of magnitude of what can be accomplished, and as an example for other private firms to follow. So in 2012, through our portfolio companies, we invested a mere $212 million to improve US water infrastructure. That's $212 million, not billions, not trillions, not nothing. Although the number may seem small, it actually improved access for water and wastewater services to 3.4 million people. That's 1% of population, okay? And allowed for conservation of 122 million gallons of water, and at the same time removed 36,000 tons of pollutants from waterways. Okay, so you can see how small amounts can actually have a tremendous, tremendous impact. And just to give you also an aggregate order, when we started investing in water in 2018, again, against all odds, and the science portfolio companies have invested roughly $700 million. That has affected 5.6 million people, okay? And as I mentioned before, 273,000 of them have come into compliance. They lived in communities with non-compliant water systems, and now they are compliant. So those people, in addition to being happier families, which is one very good thing, and healthier families, that also the real estate value has gone up. Their homes are worth more because they have a good water system. It's directly correlated. So the impact of investing in water is multiple. And contrary to what people think, can be extremely efficient and very immediate. And so that's what we want to do. That's my last comment. And with that, I would like to finally introduce Peter Glick. I've been pre-announcing that for a while. As I said, one of the foremost water experts in the world, founder of the Pacific Institute, winner of the MacArthur Foundation Genius Award, an elected member of the US Academy of Sciences, and of course, the author of The Three Ages of Water. Thank you very much.